Ah, yes, the sights and sounds of the city. We're staying in an apartment in St Leonard's, one of the inner northern suburbs of Sydney, for three nights until Friday. I had wanted to reconnect with some people in my network while I was here, as well as Jess being able to spend some time with her dad, who lives within about a 20-minute drive from here. So I've been out this morning to get some printing done, have a cup of coffee, and walking around the city. There's an energy, despite all the noise and kind of the assault on the senses, there's an energy that's not there in the country. They're very different energetically. And what I've come to realise is I actually like both. So I want to find a way to incorporate both the city surroundings and energy and the country surroundings and energy into my life. So I think we'll end up either living in a city which is perhaps a bit smaller, gives us good access to the countryside, to nature, or we'll end up living a little bit out of a city where I can get into a city quite readily whenever I feel the need to connect with that energy and to do some of the things that a city allows. Of course, I can only afford to have a home in one place, but I've discovered Airbnb is a really good way to travel. I'm delivering a webinar at midday today as part of the course I'm running for the Australian Institute of Training and Development. This is Social and Collaborative Learning Essentials, and it's an 8-week course. These are the topic headers. So we're in week 3. So we had a webinar for introduction to the course and an overview of social learning theory. It's week 3 now. We've got a webinar for on-the-job and face-to-face social learning. Similar to Julian Stott, I believe that rather than being completely informal, good quality social learning is about semi-formal and about integrating it effectively with formal learning initiatives. So a lot of the content and curator for this week is kind of theoretical in nature around this idea of the integration and the blending of social learning with formal learning, and also around the need to encourage people to think quite critically about what social learning is, as well as to critically evaluate sources of content in the context of user-generated or user-shared content. So what I want to do in the webinar is to balance that kind of theory and pondering around critical thinking with lots of really good examples of practical ways that you can run face-to-face and on-the-job social learning. In Zoom, which we'll use for the webinar today, just to find out from a range of methods of social learning what people have seen and tried for face-to-face and on-the-job social learning, and that will guide, building on experiences of the participants as to what works, sharing tips, as well as exploring some of the methods they may not be familiar with. I've done the webinar now, and I was really happy with how it went. We only had 3 people. So I think that's about a third of the participants. So we were able to do a lot of verbal discussion, which was good. There was lots of sharing of examples of different approaches people have used, and thoughts about how they could adapt, for instance, things they've seen at a conference, to actually use them for social learning face-to-face, either integrated into classroom settings or around before or after formal learning programs. Just share one technique that I picked up that I've not heard of before, and it's the 3-2-1, which is a set of things that can be shared in group settings, particularly meetings. Say you had a monthly or quarterly catch-up with a group of people who were working together, a team. You can ask for 3 things you've been involved in that period of time, 2 things you've struggled with, and 1 thing that you're proud of. So you can see how those questions can spark a whole lot of follow-on discussion. So the things you've been involved with, there could be discussion around how they're progressing. The things you've struggled with, perhaps they're things that people have already resolved. So what did you do? How did you address it? Or maybe there's some support people could provide, and 1 thing you're proud of. Again, you could generate discussion around, well, how did you do that? So I loved that little 3-2-1 technique. So thank you to the participant who shared that one. Well, it's definitely autumnal here in Sydney. You can see all the leaves on the ground, and I am walking about 20 minutes from Crow's Nest where I'm staying down to North Sydney, where I am meeting a very good friend and someone I've also worked with a few times. We're hoping to go for a walk, but it all depends if this rain holds off. It's such an irony that as I'm spending this year travelling around, I'm actually less socially isolated and better connected than when I was living in Sydney. And I think there's two reasons for that. I think the first is that I have more time on a day-to-day basis. I'm not stuck in the same old routine, spending time in the traffic, on my commute, having to get Jess off to school. So I've got more flexibility with my time. But also because I am travelling, I know I'm only in certain areas for a set period, and that there may be people that I haven't seen for some time. So I'm just putting more effort into it because the opportunity is there.